Hello, everybody. It's Peter and Sylvia. We are back with another episode of Mental Health Food for Thought, and we thought, yeah, let's do it. We can be bothered, but really, do we? It's called mental laziness this time. Um, this may not be the path of least resistance, but a lot of people choose the path of least resistance.
Hmm.
And one of my early examples of this was people I've worked with who would spend an awful lot of time and energy avoiding work at work rather than just do it.
Hmm.
Because there was somehow this pull, if you like, this mentality that, oh, I can't be bothered.
Hmm.
And they didn't realize that actually they spent as much energy and time avoiding work as they would have had they just applied themselves and done the work. Maybe they would have had some more spare time at the end of it instead of feeling exhausted because now work still had to be done after having avoided it for a long time. So that was sort of more physical laziness and can't be bothered. But we got something we're talking about these days as mental laziness. And I just wonder whether you would do an intro on what that concept is about.
Oh, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because I can imagine people are going, "What?" Because if you hear the word lazy and laziness has quite sort of negative connotations, in the workplace, or he or she or they's lazy and whatever. But the definition, if I just give the definition of mental laziness, um, mental laziness is a tendency to avoid mental effort, which is what in a way describe there, which involves a reluctance to think deeply, question beliefs, and challenge assumptions, often resulting in accepting superficial or commonly held ideas at face value. Now, another one that I've heard, which is actually for me quite very strong, is the deliberate habit of neglecting one's intellect for the easier path, as we said, taking the path of least resistance. And picking up on a point there, you said, the P word, but, procrastinating, is a lack of interest in putting off tasks because basically we can't be bothered. Now, is that we can't be bothered, or is that laziness? And what's interesting is the more we don't use our brains, the more we don't use them. It's a spiral downhill, challenging our brains to think about things. One of my partner's friends, let's call him Bob, his view is, and he is super smart and he's super clever. His view is, why would I bother to think about all these things when I've got some other people that can do it for me? And mm, I can see both sides of that. And now, is that laziness, or is it delegation, or is it I just can't be bothered, or is it that's beneath me? Who knows? But it's interesting this, and I've seen it quite a few times popping up in a few articles, popping up in interviews here and there. This element of mental laziness, that people have the mental capacity, acuity, fortitude, they're switched on, they're super smart and clever, but they're simply not using it. Now, is that lazy, or is they not using it? Where's that line? Who knows? But it's a very interesting and quite controversial, I may say, topic.
And what I think is controversial about the whole thing is if you choose to not use your brain.
Yeah.
There are tasks that we all choose not to do. We give it to somebody else to free up time.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
So if we free up thinking space, if we free up thinking capacity by not engaging in certain types of mental um, activity, then I'm fine with that.
Hmm.
But what do we use the freed up capacity for then?
Hmm.
Do we use it to idle a bit more, or do
Hmm.
we use it to do something that is really more interesting, more challenging, something that we're more engaged with? If
Hmm.
that's the case, I totally accept that we don't want to be bothered with maybe menial mental tasks that
Hmm.
something else can do, such as technology, for
Hmm.
example. I mean, everybody talks about technology these days, AI and what have you.
Hmm.
Um, and there are articles and voices out there which says that using AI makes us mentally lazy.
Hmm.
The brain is like our body; it's full of muscle. If we don't keep it alive and train it, it withers away. So if we don't use our muscles, if we don't use our arms and legs, they will get weak, and in the end, we can't use them. Same with the brain. We
Mm.
need to challenge it somehow with
Hmm.
something. And I don't know if it's crosswords or if it's reading a book or whatever it is, but I, for me, I struggle with applying mental laziness to myself.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
can't be engaged with everything and in everything, but does that make me lazy? Do I choose to, as you said about Bob, I
Yeah.
can't be bothered.
It's an interesting concept, isn't it? Because what's popped up for me there, Peter, was mental laziness in terms of we have the capacity, or a person has the capacity, the knowledge, the intelligence, the intellect to use it, but they choose not to. Now, is
Mm,
that laziness rather than somebody who doesn't have the mental capacity to do something in the first place? So this one has all the skills and capabilities, we're just not using our mental um, intellect and knowledge and intelligence. Now, one of the other things that I recall now from quite a few of the articles that I read about mental laziness, which perhaps taps into a couple of the other conversations that we have had, is about potentially this aversion to questioning. If we have a mental laziness, is there a potential that we are disinterested in challenging beliefs, practices, or commonly, or things that we've known before? Do we just not challenge them? And challenge, as we know, we grow from a challenge. Or, do we just accept the status quo because we can't be bothered to challenge it or do things differently? Or, do we just keep things at a superficial level? Accepting things without examining their validity or
mm.
logic or relevance. And how does that affect the workplace if you have a procedure or a policy that could be better, however better is quantified, but we just can't be asked to challenge it or do something different. And I suppose that leads into this can't do rather than can do attitude, and as you said, if we don't use our brain, we lose its capacity to be
So
used.
a lot of it is about ability or willingness, isn't it?
Mm,
Yeah, I can do it, but I choose not
yeah,
to.
choice is the thing
Of
that.
course, there are those who do not have the ability, but then
Yeah.
we're not talking about laziness. Lazy is something that you either switch on or switch off, isn't it?
Mm,
It's a choice.
mm-hmm,
And if you choose to just take the path of least resistance and just go with the flow, yeah, you're going with the flow. The flow will still be there, but where do you end up?
mm,
Um, it does remind me of a conversation I had with a client only last week, who was being challenged by her boss in her review that she wasn't speaking up enough. The boss knew she had it all, but she wasn't challenging. The boss wanted to hear the challenges. He wanted to hear my client's thoughts on this, that, and the other. And it wasn't that my client was lazy. She was afraid.
mm,
She had been taught by previous employers to just shut up
mm,
and go with the flow and don't make waves, don't upset the apple cart and all the rest of it. Um, as had previous boyfriends and parents and what have you. So she had learned to blend in with the wallpaper, but
mm-hmm,
she was absolutely, and she still is. She has a lot to offer, and she's
mm,
very good at what she does, and she's now ready for a higher position. And she learned that by failing a job interview, where they said, "Do you know what? You're holding yourself back here. You're idling." And it wasn't laziness; it was fear
mm.
of actually taking the next step. And I just wonder if part of what we call mental laziness Is that for some a choice? I can't be bothered. Or is it for some a case of what happens if I do speak up? What
mm,
happens if I do
mm,
express that I have an opinion or
mhm,
that I think slightly differently?
mm,
And then you hold back, and then you think you're lazy, or you're being told that you're not living up to your potential. I'm not entirely sure it's a clear-cut case of anything. But of course, there are people who just say, well, can't be bothered. I'm
mm,
fine.
mm,
Okay, we need them as well.
mm. Oh, we definitely need those too. And it is interesting, lazy to stick your head above the parapet, for want of a better phrase, takes guts. It takes courage. You need to be brave about that. And it takes energy to do that. And it takes hard work sometimes to do that. And quite often, to your point, that fear of what's going to happen if I do. So there's a line between when is it laziness and when is it fear. At the same time, laziness is generally around you have what you need, you don't want to use it, you don't choose to use it, you don't want to push yourself, that type of thing. You just get by, some may say.
Hmm.
But it's a very interesting concept, this thing about mental laziness. Picking up on an earlier point you said about technology, a couple of times, just for a bit of fun, I've tapped into Microsoft Word, come up, what would you like to write about? And I've put in a subject. Bosh! Within a few seconds, up comes this magnificent, piece of work. But I haven't used my brain at all, at all. So there is that, and if I carried on doing that, what's going to happen to my brain? You mentioned keeping doing crosswords and things like that. We older and senior people are encouraged to keep our brains active. Now, where does that cross over to laziness, and where is that brain activity? That's for another conversation, but it's really interesting. I find this concept of mental laziness, and I would be really interested to hear what the audience thinks about this concept. Does it actually exist? Is it a load of bunkum, or is there some element of truth in it?
Yeah. Tell us what you think. Are we mentally lazy? Has ChatGPT and such AI tools taken over our critical thinking? Are we just accepting everything as being the truth because it's easy?
Mm,
We can move on to something else that we think is easy.
mm,
Is easy what we're really after?
mm,
Are we lazy?
mm,
What's going on?
mm.
Tell us what you think, and thank you for staying with us. We shall see you in another video. Take
Yeah.
care. Bye for now.
Cheerio.